Hey guys, it's KenDeep here. Thanks again for tuning in and welcome to another one of my videos. You might know me as a Guilty Gear Xrd player, as a Granblue player, as a former Dragon Ball FighterZ commentator. Well, not former, I'm still doing commentary, and former Tech Monster. And I wanted to do a video about Guilty Gear Strive because I've been playing around for it now for a bit, and I was already hinting at doing a video like this. And the kind of video I wanted to make is about the UI of Guilty Gear Strive. Now, who am I to criticize the UI? So first of all, maybe let me explain something about myself. I am, of course, a fighting game player, but I am also professionally, as my main job, a UI designer. So I have a lot of experience with UI. I've been working on UI, I mean a lot comparatively, of course, compared to a lot of other fighting game players. I've been in the video game development industry now for 6 years, and I've been working as a UI designer for roughly 5.5 years out of those. Yeah, I've been working on like different games. Not all of my UI has been great, but I've gained a lot of experiences and I've gotten opportunities to learn from very good UI designers respectively. And I think I have also gotten a very good understanding on the fundamentals of UI design. And with that, I want to give my take on, on Guilty Gear Strive in order to help the Arxis improve their UI so that more people can enjoy this game without any hassle. So what I don't want this video to be is to be a rant. Because of course I personally, this game is not for me. This has been very obvious since the start. I think it would have been very ignorant from my side to think otherwise and to expect Arxis to change the game to my liking and to the liking of other people who might think like me, who maybe have started with Xrd and who have enjoyed the game a lot. So it's not about that. Regardless of my opinion of the game from the gameplay perspective and from the graphics and etc., I still want the game to be successful because I owe the Guilty Gear license a lot. They allowed me to travel to Japan, to Singapore, well, somewhat to Singapore. My first major travels to to Sweden, or also to Copenhagen in the northern part of Europe, or to Czech. A lot of travels have been done for Guilty Gear Xrd, and I was successful. And I'm not as successful with Guilty Gear as I have been, for example, with KOF and especially with Dragon Ball. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoy my commentator tenure in Dragon Ball, but I am still more of a competitive player, and I've enjoyed my competitive time in Guilty Gear a lot. So the least I can do is try to give feedback to Arxis to make sure that the legacy of the Guilty Gear isn't tainted by bad UI, because say what you will about the gameplay, but if the UI is bad, then the gameplay will suffer from it. Unfortunately, that is the case. So yeah, let me get to it. Enough rambling about me being awesome, etc., which I'm not, by the way. But let's get started about some of the feedback I have for the UI. So first of all, we are in the character select screen. There's a couple of stuff that's pretty nice about the character select screen that I want to highlight first, so things I would like to keep if possible. So first of all, I am a big fan of the sound design in the character select screen. I'm not talking about the music. The music is whatever, that will probably get changed soon, and I hope it will, at least for the because this is an old track. But what's really awesome is the sound design for the navigation. So if you listen closely, actually let me put up the sound. So if you were able to hear it correctly, each direction has a different sound, and that might seem actually quite unimportant and mundane, but it's actually very useful to memorize, like to confirm, okay, I have done the right sequence of, you know, navigations. I go up, right, you know. Let's say usually we start at Soul in the character select screen if we go to a tournament and we start the game, you know. So I start at Soul. I'm usually a Potemkin player, so I know I have to go down, right, you know. And in other games, or in almost every game, the navigation would be the navigation sound would be the same. So if I were to go down, I wouldn't be able to confirm that difference with the sound. It's not a huge like thing, and it's not super important, but it's a nice thing to have, and it's a nice quality of life change that I think actually will make a difference, because you will be like, oh damn, I navigated wrongly, before you even confirm the button, because you're quicker with the sound than you are visually. There's of course granted that the tournaments have audio setup, which I always hope they do. Another thing that I do like is the button configuration. I think they are doing quite a lot of things right, and I think they have a couple of good approaches that need a little bit more adjustment, but in general, so I think their navigation is very responsive. It feels very, very nice. It's very instant, and what I really like is on the top the gamepad layout, that you are getting like the gamepad actually, and the assignment of like the buttons like P, K, S, H are displayed directly where their respective position is. I think that's a really great idea, but it could use a couple of improvements. So first, the improvement is which one is R1, R2, L1, L2. You cannot. It's impossible to tell. It really is. So if I go like here, for example, I cannot tell that that dust right now is on R2. I wouldn't have guessed that. It's a wild guess, so it doesn't really convey that information well. And another thing that I hope to see improved is that they allow also other input devices to be displayed as a template. So let's say you have you can see there's a button type, and it's set to custom right now. And I suspect that in the final game they will allow you to use different presets of configurations. So of course you will have like type A, type B, type C, you know, like in all the previous Guilty Gear, or like in Guilty Gear Xrd, at least in all the Guilty Gear Xrds. What I actually do hope what they will do is that they will create presets for every input device. So for stick, for pad, for hitbox, and maybe for other input devices that are available that I'm not thinking of right now. And dependent on which preset you're highlighting, you will get a different image that displays the correspondent device. So you will see a stick, you will see a hitbox, etc., etc. I think that would be a really nice quality of life change that actually makes button settings easier and makes it much more easier to like see, okay, I have currently bound P, you know, to like this button or to this button, you know. So I think that's a way that I can improve this. Nice idea, even more. One thing that I definitely think needs to change, and it's been an issue for a lot of like Arc Sys games already, is the information on removing buttons. So first of all, it's a little bit awkward that you cannot unbind a button from like the main buttons. I think you should always be able to do it, and then, you know, if you close, just say, hey, you still have to assign these buttons, because that way it's much more clearer. Because then you also allow the players to just like unbind everything and then freshly bind things. Some people like prefer it that way, but it also allows you to to understand that, hey, if you press to the right, something will get removed. that's something that some people don't even know that exists in like all Arxis games since Xrd. You know, like Guilty Gear Xrd has it, Dragon Ball Fighter Z has it, Grand Blue Versus has it, you know. But there is no information that this place holds right to unbind. There's nothing like that. And if you do it on like one of the main buttons, it doesn't even do anything. So even if you by mistake do hold right, the game tells you it doesn't do anything. It only does something when you do it on a macro, which I think is also not telling enough because it's slowly fading out. It's a little bit too slow. It needs to tell you immediately, hey, your input is doing something. So for example, let's say you cannot unbind something on the main buttons, which maybe you want it that way. I can understand that. At least you have to give the player the information like a cross or like a shake, right? That displays your input right now is invalid, but it's an input that we register, you know. And as soon as you go like here, maybe like a circle appears around the button that fills itself to display, hey, you're currently charging something, you know. And the fact that the circle appears is an immediate feedback of, okay, something is happening. So something like this definitely needs to be adjusted for this. I think this is important for new players and for players who come from other games who don't have this feature. And it's also important just from the science of feedback kind of perspective, you know. So let me assign my buttons accordingly. Circle, dot. Alright, close. Another thing that I do like about the character select screen is the range display. I think it's a nice idea to display what range a character usually wants to be, because also honestly it's less useful for new beginners, but it's actually useful for players like, you know, like me or like all the esports players or, you know, other strong players, because then they understand more clearly what the intention was with the character from the designers, and if the current implementation is as intended or not. So let's say Mei right now is obviously not meant to be played at full range because she has only like 1 point in it, but that's not something that you would necessarily agree with when you look at Guilty Gear Xrd Mei, because she has a lot of like tools that allow her to go out and in like all the time, and her dolphins and her ball sets also allow for a little bit of zoning, not too much, you know. It's not like a 5-star zoning kit, but it was there, it was available. So it's easier for players to understand the intentions, you know. But now to the less favorable parts. So there are a couple of things that I think the character selection definitely needs to get changed, and they all come down to one element, and that's chaos. I think there's way too much information that is not important, that takes a lot of visual focus, while the important parts are not really visible enough. So for example, the label on the bottom, like the striking from afar, you can't touch them, long range specialist, I don't think that's really important, like for the long term. But it takes a significant amount of screen space, in contrast to, for example, the color indicator, like the color 01. That's very small in comparison, or the name or the ease of use, you know. The settings also comparatively small, and it all gets drowned out in comparison to like the mirror of the background that mirrors the character reflection, you know. And it gets even worse, like the get set part is so small, it drowns out in comparison to all the other big elements that are only visually, that like they're only fluff, they don't serve like an important purpose. So it's very difficult to convey information or to receive information from the game, especially because the animation that you see in the player one, like if you look at the portrait of Axel in the middle, you can see the player one, that's P1 that's bouncing, right? And their idea was to use the animation with the P1 turning into a ball and then going to the character side to convey, hey, now you have selected that character. Look at your character select screen, or at your left on your own side, right? But it's so small that it's barely noticeable, and that's especially bad with like the background animations. Like it's very difficult to conceive that information, especially in moments where the background has a lot of like action going on. Even if it's blurred out, there's so much contrast that makes it difficult to notice. So like here, you were not able to really notice that properly. Now again, even worse, right? So that's something that they definitely need to adjust. And the way they have to adjust it is to either make the contrast between important elements and unimportant elements bigger, because right now everything is flat and like there's not a consistent like visual language. So for example, the buttons sign is it's a square, right? And it has like hard corners, but at the same time, for example, the color indicator it's skewed on 45 degrees, and it has rounded corners. And then you have this labeling on the bottom that is tilted upwards and has like a triangle for a corner. You know, very weird visual language that's very inconsistent in a lot of places, which forces, or not forces, but it causes players to be less clear about which information is important and which one isn't. And they one of the other changes that would be is to make the important information bigger. So for example, why is the stage select and the sound select smaller than the labeling of the character select text in the middle? What's so important about me knowing that this is the character select screen? I am navigating characters. I know that I'm selecting a character. It's not rocket science. So, but me not noticing that that I can select the stage on this screen, or overlooking it, or not knowing immediately which stage or which sound I have selected, that is bad. That has to change definitely. And if you have selected a character, make it much more noticeable that I have currently selected a character and that I'm currently selecting the color. You can do this in different ways. For example, you can do it like in Xart, where the character does an animation when you have selected him, and that so, for example, like an idle pose when that he does in game, or maybe like a taunt. You know, like if I still navigate and now I select him, now he does an animation, and I know, okay, I have selected a character. But you also have to make the color choice much more noticeable, because nothing really changes except for like the range thing disappearing, but the shape of the color select is basically the same. Nothing changes about my character, you know, and they have to adjust that in some way. What I do like about the color select though is how fast it loads the palette swap. So that's actually pretty nice, and it's also giving clear feedback that hey, it's loading something right now. So I think that's actually pretty nice. Furthermore, I think the information on the top, you know, this character information, or no, the player information, like the GG player, soul bad guy level 1, I think that's unnecessary. I don't think you need this in the character select screen, especially not in an offline mode. But I don't even think you need it in an online mode, because that information doesn't really help you selecting the character, unless, of course, that information changes depending on which character you pick. Then I can see it, but that doesn't happen right now, so I don't think that's the case. So let me select characters and let's go to the in-game stuff. So there's one more thing that I want to say here. So for example, here in the loading screen, I don't understand why the character portrait and the character name is so small. It doesn't, like, it's a loading screen, I get it, and that's pretty nice for what it is, but at least, like, if you already have information, convey it properly, and don't double the information. Then why are you, for example, right now at the Heaven on Hell stuff? Now it's going to say Chip Zenith versus Chip Zenith. Why are you telling me this now when you already told me this in the loading screen? Just use the loading screen for this. Don't double the information. There's no reason to go for this, right? So, going to the game stuff. But first we go to the pause menu, because the pause menu also has some things that I want to mention. So first of all, the fact that the pause menu right now is built like this, I think is not good. I think it has a lot of issues for tournament play. And I will show you in a minute why, as soon as the CPU has beaten me. 1 second. Alright. Okay, so what's the one thing that you notice right now? So you notice that on the player 2 side, I can see how much burst the character still has, the player 2, and how much risk he has. It's very difficult to proceed because the UI itself is not that great, and I'm gonna get to it later. But you can see the elements, and with that you can like retrieve the information. But you cannot do the same for the player 1 side, because the options menu is asymmetrical. So I think it's a good idea to hide the information while in the pause menu, but you should do it consequentially for both players. Because what happens now is, let's say we are in a tournament, or maybe in a local, and accidentally a third party is pressing their home button, and they're triggering the PSN menu, you know, like this. So now we go back to the game, it's paused, and we basically go, either we reset the game, we reset the round, we give the round to whoever, you know, did not pause, or we just continue. But if we continue now, you have information asymmetry that will hurt one of the two players. And that's not good. That shouldn't be the case. I don't think that that's a good idea to have. If you want to hide the information, hide it consequentially. Don't do it just for the sake of style, which is a common issue with this game. Is they just want to try things out, and it's okay, but in this instance it's especially bad. And it will only hurt in edge cases, but these edge cases are important. Which is why I would please suggest to Oxys either make the background of the pause menu label, make that go away, make it transparent, or just make everything white. You know, just make everything hard to see, or just do like a consequent, like yellow line on the background, so every information on that layer is not retrievable. Which I also think is not a good idea, but if you do it, at least do it consistently. Another thing I want to mention is the color scheme. I think the color scheme is all over the place. It's very inconsistent. Like now you have like this bubblegum red, but earlier you had like this sharp red. For the life bars you have like this orangey orange. Here you also have like these orange things, but you also have this yellow. In the character select you had then these harsh, also like these crescent moon reds, you know, like very all over the place color scheme, which results in a very confusing visual language. Again, you know, the shape is very confusing, the colors are very confusing, the information is really inconsistent, and you're not really retrieving information properly. So they definitely have to adjust the color scheme as well. And the same issue right now here is I don't think that it works very well. So also like the yellow, that it being yellow, I would assume that yellow means that it's normal in this case because the bars are normal, and that red would mean it's unusual. So I think that also in this instance the visual language is misleading to what they actually want to convey. Sorry for my raspy voice, by the way. A positive thing, and I'm gonna go right out of the gate, I think they almost nailed it like 100% is the command list. This was one of the first things that they've shown, and I think for good reason, because it's working really well. There's good feedback, like when a clip is loading, I think that's nice. I think they have a good color language in the screen, because if you notice, the command normals have a different color, the special attacks have a different color, the supers, so the overdrives, have a different color as well. So it's always very clear in which part you are. It's a little bit more subtle, but I think that's okay. It doesn't need to be in your face. It's also very easy to see what each move does. There's a description, there's a video clip that gives an example. And one of the cool things I also think is like the Rekka sequences. Because I think it very clearly conveys the information that, hey, this move is done as a follow-up from the previous move. I think that's something that a lot of fighting games nowadays still struggle with to convey properly, especially Tekken. I think Tekken could definitely, you know, get a good work on the move list UI. But they have done this very, very well. I also like the fact that they use the buttons and not like the system buttons, you know, not triangle and X and stuff like that, because I don't think that's really useful. Ideally, you would give the player the option to switch between the two, but I think if you would choose one of the two, you should go with this. Because it's more useful in general to also teach the player which button is what. I also like the fact how the tab system works, you know. You have the system mechanics here, or the system, all in all, they've done a wonderful job. The only thing I would improve is, again, a little bit like the structure, like things aren't aligned properly, like the scroll bar is a little bit off compared to where the cutout is on the content of the scrolling list. As you can see above the command number 4 entry, it's a little bit cut out above the scroll bar. I think that's something that they could change by just making the background of the scroll bar a little bit higher. And I think what would be a nice thing, but that's just a nice thing to have, is change the color of the preview on the right. You know, you notice the red lines on the bottom and on the top. Adjust the colors on that depending on which entry you have selected. So right now it should be a little bit more orangey, now it should be a light red, now it should be a darker red. Stuff like that. So not a darker red, but a more saturated red. But all in all, I'm a big fan of the command list. I think they should keep this, and I think a lot of other fighting games could do well to copy from this, for sure. In-game stuff. So now we finally go into the game itself. Straight out, before I unpause the game, because it's a little bit difficult to talk about it while the in-game stuff is happening, since this is versus CPU, I think the tension bar is not great. I think it has a very unclear visual language. The gear icon doesn't really convey the information of what it's doing. I understand what they were trying to go for, because it's guilty gear, obviously, right? But usually in UI, if you see a gear, you associate it with different things. You associate it with either something progressing, something loading, something saving, or a configuration. So it's an icon that already has a lot of like language weight to it, if I, so to speak. I hope you understand what I'm going for. So it's a little bit confusing because it doesn't really convey properly what it's supposed to do, unless you're a seasoned player, but at that point you don't even need to get gear. For a seasoned player like me, I already see, okay, I'm in the middle, I have half of the bar full, so that means I have an RC available, or a super, you know? Sorry again for my raspy voice, let me grab something to drink. So, I think it's an unnecessary change to how other fighting games have done it previously. Previous fighting games have always just gone for like display it via the number, flash the bar, you know, or convey it like through background animation, but not through icons. I think icons is very questionable, and I don't think they should do this actually, because it will only confuse new players. It will confuse even more newbies, so fighting game players, or so players that have never played fighting games before, and it's not a good way to convey the information, especially if there are then suddenly like 2 gears. It's like, what? Why is the one gear in the middle and why is the one gear on the right? Like, if it's a resource, then it should just be like a gear that is grayed out, and that should turn visible once you have enough meter to go for it. You know? And they should be like next to each other. It should be clear that they're one resource and not like 2 independent pods, because they're not independent. They are actually dependent on each other, because as soon as you have 2, the first one will never get wasted. So they should definitely change that. Text-wise, I think the game is very inconsistent when it comes to its text. So in the pause menu, the labels for the buttons, they are very clean, but in the in-game, they are very rough and they are hard to read. The tension is like, it's stretched and it's super small. The chips Zenith, so the main labels, they are weirdly like shaped out, you know. That's complicated. Thanks to CPU. The burst is barely readable, honestly. The risk is not readable at all. So that's something that they definitely need to adjust their font handling, because the font handling is just not working well. That is especially true for like the negative thing that you just saw on the top left. I think it's way too big and it obscures too much like view, and it takes away too much attention from the main happening. And it's especially awful with the combo counter. And the combo counter is bad for multiple reasons. So you saw whenever a combo happens, there's a lot of space that's taken away from the combo counter. This isn't just bad because it takes away a lot of attention. It's also bad because it it blocks the view to the stage background. Now you ask yourself, why is it so important that you see the stage background like 100% all the time? And the reason is simple. The corner game in this game is super unique and super important because of wall crush, or whatever it's called. Wall break, I think. So you always want to know, okay, how close to the corner am I? And if the combo counter blocks that view, and because of that it also makes it difficult to see, so here for example, to see, okay, is the wall currently about to break? Because there's so much going on in that one corner, then that's not a good UI feedback. Then it's hurting the information flow for the player, and it hurts the fluidity of the action in the game. And of course you can train against this. You can train to not care about the combo counter anymore, but that's against the idea of a UI. The idea shouldn't require you to be trained for it. A UI should train you to play the game properly, right? Not really, but the UI should help you play the game, right? It shouldn't make it more difficult for you. And in this instance, the font works against it. It requires you to invest more time to understand properly why or how something happens. Now, moving aside from the font, and one more small thing about the attention gauge. So if I backdash a little bit, I think the arrows right here, I don't think they are a good idea. So if you already have meter, the arrows are barely noticeable, and on the top left the warning it's way too noticeable. And the color schemes are so different that you don't associate both necessarily. And the arrows are also a little bit misleading. I think the arrows in this instance are not a good visual language to use, because for player 1, they go from left to right. And left to right usually is meant as a progressive direction for the western part of the world. It isn't the case for like Chinese or for for Japan, Japanese or for Arabic regions. There it's more they reach from right to left, right? But we also have more experiences, for example, with jump and runs and with other games that we always walk from left to right. So left to right is always like a progression. But here it's a punishment. So it feels counterintuitive to display the information that way. So I would definitely try to go for something different. Avoid that big ass corner information about negative penalty and also you get the same when you corner crush someone. So if I come on, don't move. Come on. See? So now there's on the top left corner, there's this positive. It's way too big and they definitely need to change it. I don't think it's not attention grabbing enough for how valuable it is in comparison to other elements like burst or risk that are much more important in the moment, right? So they have to adjust this. Another thing that they have to adjust is the life bar, like completely. I think the life bar is the worst life bar design I've ever seen for a fighting game, and I've seen a couple of terrible life bars. Like Primal Rage is pretty horrible, but this is pretty nasty, and for several reasons. So, for example, right now, let's say we look at player 2. How much of a percentage do you think the player 2 has when it comes to health? Now, in most other games, it would be very easy to approximate this, right? And the reason why it's easy is because you have a lot of like visual indicators that help you gauge approximately. Okay, let's say, for example, here. Let me grab a screenshot from a different game. So this is very rough. I'm not gonna align it now to my layout or anything, but Dragon Ball FighterZ, I think, is a good example of displaying or giving you guidance on parts where it matters. So usually in Dragon Ball FighterZ, the most important information is, will your 3 level 1s kill? And to Dragon Ball's credit, that information is always available. And that's thanks to the sparking icon. The sparking icon is always there. Like the outer edge of the sparking icon is approximately where the life of the opponent has to be in order to kill him with 3 level 1s. And it's not always the case, so it's a generalization, but it's still a very useful visual guidance to help players confirm their stuff properly without being like, oh shit, I thought it would have been enough, but it wasn't. Damn, right? And in Guilty Gear Strive, that is not the case at all. There is nothing that helps you with guiding approximation of information. And why is that? Exactly because of the thing that a lot of people have complained about. The moving portrait, the moving burst, and the moving risk gauge. They are absolutely counterintuitive and counterproductive to creating a good UI. And I know what their idea was behind this, but it's not a good idea. I'm sorry, but I just have to say it the way it is. Because right now you don't have any indicator where it's 50%, you don't have any indicator where it's 30%, which was very important in Guilty Gear Xrd because of guts, you know. It wasn't actually as important to know if my opponent was on 50 or 60%, but 30% was super important. Because that was the area where I knew, okay, Guts is now kicking in really, really hard. And but here you have nothing of the sorts. You have nothing that helps you say, if you're at 50%, 70%, 30%, 20%, 10%, nothing like that. The only thing that you have is the heart icons, but they're changing their shape depending on if it's round 1, round 2, round 3, so they're inconsistent as well. So how do we fix this? And honestly, I'm just gonna say the obvious, but you're gonna fix this the same way you're gonna fix the risk and the burst display, by just making the burst a stationary element and making the risk a stationary element in the HUD and making them bigger. So put the risk, right next to the timer, make it a little bit larger, well, not a little bit, make it much larger, and make it so long that it's displaying until like the 30% mark of your health, and make the burst so big that it displays or that it helps you see from 70 to 100% health. And that way you can guarantee that the burst and the risk information are always available, and you will guarantee the player will always be able to estimate how much health do they have left. That alone is a big positive change for the UI that I think would make it much more usable, but right now it's barely anything. One quality of life change that I would see in correspondence to this moving thing going away is making the character portraits bigger and making them change colors depending on what color palette the player has used. Only KOF has done this, and I never understood why, because I think it's an awesome polish thing. It helps viewers instantly notice and instantly understand which character is on which side of the health bar. But right now you cannot really tell anything. I could be the right ship, I could be the left ship. Wouldn't really, I wouldn't really understand it that well. So I definitely feel they have to adjust a lot in that regard, and nothing in the UI right now in game works properly, and for a lot of more reasons than just it looks stupid. The visual style, I'm not even commenting on the visual style. I've already done a mock-up on the visual style, and I think it's very un-Guilty Gearish. But even if it is guilty, like, let's say we don't care about the visuals being Guilty Gear, it's not a functional UI, and that's always the top priority, is have a super functional UI so that you can then from that point on add the flair, add the flavor, add the fluff, and there's a lot of things missing, and they have to do a lot more readjustments than just changing the timer and changing making the risk not go around the corner anymore in order to make the UI really usable. I commend them trying to go for new things, but the new things have to make sense and they have to be deliberate. They can't be just for the sake of being new, because UI is user oriented. It's called user interface for a reason. You don't use UI to create a style. You use UI to convey information. And with that being said, there's one last thing I want to mention, and it's the timer. And it's a really small thing, but I think the timer font needs to be adjusted, because the timer, because of the weird skew, it's really difficult to read it in a spur of the moment. Because like the 7 was up, like here the 6 was up and the 3 was down. That way it doesn't really seem like one number, so it's a little bit more difficult to read it as one number than it would be if it was just displayed normally. So that's something that they should also adjust. And to finish things off, I want to talk about this screen. I think this screen is meh. There is a couple of things that I like. I like the fact that they are trying to like convey information about the player style. But I think they're doing it like completely the wrong way. So for example, you got the potential to be a mind-reading tactician. I feel it's saying nothing. It's a sentence that doesn't really tell me anything. And I think the win-lose part will not really work for local play. And I think they should keep that part consistent. They should always be able to display player 1, player 2 wins, streaks. Like, they should do that consistently across all game modes. But this is right now very specific for online, and I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's a good idea that they design with online in mind. But I think Street Fighter 5 has only shown us that that the UI can suffer if you design everything around online, because online has a lot of things that offline cannot provide, and they really need to adjust this. And I think this information is completely useless, because a lot of the information that's being displayed here is not understandable. What is variance on the offense? What is evasion? What is judgment? What is guts? What is versatility and the technique? You know, what does it all mean? There's nothing that really explains what these values are, and they're kind of redundant too. Like I don't need that. Just give me, like, this is already good. And if I want to retrieve specific information, I should be able to do this from a profile, but not like from this. I think this is kind of nonsense, honestly. The bottom 3 like images, I don't know what they're for. I don't know what they will be for, and I think it's a bad sign that we don't understand them yet. Obviously, there's something supposed to be functional in the full game that is still being worked on because of the icons. I think it's a weird icon to have that, but it's understandable. But they definitely don't convey properly what kind of information those 3 images are going to be, which usually is not a good sign for a UI. So with that being said, this is basically like my whole overview of the UI, of my opinion of the UI and what I would like to see changed, and what I actually like from the UI, and what I don't like from the UI, and what they need to improve a lot, and what they've actually already done in the past but don't do anymore with this game. Again, I don't want this to be a rant. I want this to be a productive video. I want this game to be there for the better. I want this game to improve, and I'm sure that it has the possibility to improve. They just need to actually listen to the feedback that the players are giving them. I'm not going to go into this game much more, because I understand that this game is not meant for me, and I respect that, and I hope everyone who plays this game has a lot of fun. And because I do know that a lot of people are looking forward to this game the way it's designed right now. And I'm just gonna do my thing. I'm gonna continue playing Grand Blue. I'm gonna continue doing commentary for Dragon Ball, and I'm gonna hope the best for the future Guilty Gear community, because the community is the reason why I am where I am right now, and the same goes for the game. And with that being said, I wish you the best of luck, Arxis. I hope this project is a success. And if it's not a success, I hope at least that you learn your lessons and that you are able to come back from this. But I don't even want to go into that direction. I really hope you are successful with your ideals and with your ideas. And I hope you listen to the feedback that we are telling you. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think this video is going around like 40 minutes to 50 minutes. So I know it's a long time to commit to UI. And please feel free to share this. Please feel free to, talk about the UI and give your own opinion about it and discuss the UI, because I think that's only for the better if this is an active talking point. Because I can see a lot of players already have fun on Twitter. So let's keep it that way. Thanks for tuning in, and see you to the next time. Peace.